YouTube. Hello viewers, and welcome back to another episode of creating our YouTube social media API using Laravel. A few things have changed, and sorry I haven't been around a bit. I've moved my room, and obviously it was a little bit awkward trying to set up my microphone and things, and I've got a lot more space now, so it's pretty cool, and I've made some changes to the stream, so I apologize for how long it's taken to actually come back. There's a few things that I'm currently doing in the pipeline though, so like we focusing on the social media platform at the moment. Then I'll soon be releasing my new Unreal Engine tutorials. I'm actually thinking about moving away from blueprints for our next future videos. They'll be more focused on C++ in either Unreal or C# in Unity. I'm not too sure which one I want to follow yet, but it's going to be following the same structure of using web APIs and how we can transfer data between stuff and, you know, kind of work on the same game dev channel that I've got, so we might as well just focus on that. But I don't want to talk too much about that because obviously we'll leave that for further episodes, but we need to carry on with our tutorial series currently because there's a few things we still need to do. If I remember correctly, the last time we left off is that we got to a point where we had a forgotten password and we're about to reset the password itself, and we're passing a token through the email. As we can see here on the email itself, it does have in our mail trap, we can see that we did get this response back saying that the password reset link, and we had all the information for that password there. Now, obviously we need to create some logic to change that password, but there's a few things we need to check. Firstly, we need to see if this token is actually valid, and we can do that because inside our database, we noticed that we stored that token as a value inside the database. So we need to check against that first, and then we need to do a few other things to check against the user to see if actually are you the user that you should be changing. So we'll look at things like email addresses and etc. So we need to do a few checks and stuff before we can just say, okay, you can change this password, and we'll follow through each one of those steps one by one. But before we do that, we just need to change just a little bit of logic inside our actual application. When we last left, we had that root as get. We're actually going to change this because we want to pass some parameters this time. I was actually going to do it into two steps where we're going to find the token first. That's why we're using a get. And then we could check if the token was valid, and then we'll pass back. We might as well just do everything in one. That way we don't spend too much time on extra lessons that's not necessary. So we can just keep it under one category. So we're going to have this as post, and we've got our forgotten password, and we're passing our token value. We can still do this because we know that our email is that, and we don't really want to change that because obviously our email is currently focused on that URL point, so we're not going to change anything with the URL string. Just a heads up, I'm also going to release a video with the new Laravel. The routes have all changed in the new Laravel series, in the new Laravel that's been released. So if you are following on like Laravel 7, this will not be valid anymore, by the way. Just to give you a heads up, it's slightly different now. I could run a tutorial if you guys want me to show you how to set up routes correctly in Laravel 7 if you want. I'll just do that as like a separate video. So we need to create a new function for this forgotten password token. So we know that it's currently inside our auth controller. So we're just going to grab that, hop into our auth controller. I'm actually going to close everything that's here. Sorry, I keep everything open. I shouldn't really do that. And we're going to create a new function, just like we have done on every single one of our videos. So public function, sorry, my microphone is in the most awkward place now. Public function, and we're going to just pass that in, like so. And with inside this forgotten password, we're going to need a few things. One is going to be the request that comes in. Now remember, when we're handling requests, we were passing this in, or we could create our own ones like we did with this register user request. I would strongly suggest that you create your own request functionality, but because of these tutorial videos, we're trying to just be as quick as we can. So obviously for your homework and what else, you can just set up your own request feature if you like. But for now, we're just going to be using the generic Laravel version of requests. So we're going to pop that into there. And then the last thing we're going to need is what's being passed in on the parameter, which is the token that's being passed in. Pretty simple, right? Not too difficult. So there's a few things we obviously need to check before, or we can actually test to see if this is working by simply just putting a DD, and then we can just say we got to this route. Okay, I spelled that completely wrong, but it doesn't matter. It's just a DD, so we're not too bothered about that. So what we need to do is we need to hop into our Postman, and inside Postman we need to make sure that we have that route. And sorry, I'm still in my work stuff, so I'll just pop over. Oh no, it's still not personal, sorry. Need to switch up to personal. And we're currently working on this YouTube series. And currently we've got this forgotten password reset, and we don't actually have an API route for it yet. If we want to quickly set one up, it's not an issue because we can just jump into that email that we have. So we can just jump straight into the email and we can just copy this link. So if we just copy link location, head back into our Postman file, and so, sorry, into our Postman application, and we can just create, or we can duplicate this, I guess, and just paste that new URL in. So it kind of gives us the same URL, but this time we've got the token attached to it, and that's what we want. And we did have it as a post request. So if we actually send this post request now, we should get to a DD. This all works as I hope it should. There we go. So if we preview, we can see we got to this routi, right, which is not the best of things, but obviously we don't need, it doesn't really matter. So some things that we want to make sure that we have for this reset is two things. We don't want the person's name as a form parameter because it's not required. So inside our body, all we need is an email. So this is going to be an email we're going to check against for the same token. So we have a token and an email that we're kind of checking against to make sure that we are getting the correct user. But then obviously the other thing that we're going to need is the new password that the user sends through, because obviously he's changing his password. So we need to make sure that we have the correct one. And we can just change this to test 2 as an example, or actually we could just call it password 2, like that. So if we had send now, again, we're just going to get the DD. That's fine. But what we can do is we can check these routes to make sure that these are working. So we can go back into our PHP store and we can just check these requests. So remember, we can just do DD and then $request all will show us everything that we have within inside the request, right? So we get our email and password that's being passed in here. That's perfect because that's what we want to happen. Obviously, we notice that we're not getting this code. Well, that's because we passed it in as a new parameter. And that's the nice thing about Laravel is that if we attach an entity to the end of this, we know that we can pull this in as a separate entity into our function. So in this case, we got token. So if I had to DD onto token, so $token, like so, and run that, we should just get in our in our Postman, we should just get the YB3X EGZ bet. And that's what that value is there. And sorry, I might have changed the screen before, but when we're inside the application, I made this DD here. I'm sorry if you didn't see it in Postman, I'll do it again. But on that request, if we have a look back onto Postman, you'll be able to see that inside Postman, we just get email and password, not the code. Sorry, I've got this new screen thing going on and I'm still trying to get used to it. So bear with me if some screens don't show up. It shouldn't happen that often, to be honest. Right, so now we've got all the values. So we've got the code, which is great, and we've got all our request data. Now we need to do something with this, okay? And the first thing we need to do is we need to kind of work out, okay, I'm passing in this value, and I need to check to see if that value, right? So if these two values, this email and this password, actually belong inside our database, which we know it does because we can see that we've got the email and the password inside our database table. So we have to write some logic to fix that. So let's go into here and let's just start writing some logic. Best thing to do is, obviously we're going to delete this DD and we don't need this anymore. So we're going to trash this out. Remember, I do all my coding on the fly, as we always do. And we've got this thing called the user service, which I don't think is going to really help us. It's been a while since I've looked at this code base, to be honest. I'm sure we did have a password reset service, which we do. Okay, so we can go to the password reset service. So this is going to be called check token. We're just going to call this. Okay, and obviously we're going to go to this, and then it's going to be password reset service. And then obviously we've made one called create password reset. We're not actually going to use this one this time. We're actually going to do check reset. Again, you can call this whatever you like, but in this case, I'm just going to call it check reset, and I spelled that completely wrong. Check reset, like that. I think I'm going to have to move my mic for future videos. And then obviously we've got this request and the token, and the only things that we really want to check on here is request, email, and we also want to check the tokens. These are the only two parameters we want to pass in. Now, I'm not really validating this, and you should really validate that the same way as we have done with our own custom requests. So please make sure that you do that. At the moment, this is not getting validated. So we need to make sure that you do validate that. Otherwise, we'll pass in a null value here and it won't work. Or you can pass in not even an email and we'll still have the same issue. So make sure that you do the correct form request features. And so we're just going to go through our whole repository pattern that we have done. So we're just going to copy that. We're going to go into our service. And then we're going to create a new function for this. So public function. And we're just going to paste that in. Obviously, it's not going to be called request email. We're just going to have this as $email because we're passing in the request, and we'll still have token, which is perfectly fine. We can use that. And then all we're going to do is we're going to return back if we do have a valid token associated to that email and token. And obviously, we're just going to grab this. I'm doing this really quick. We've done this so many times, so you guys should be really used to doing this now, of using this repository pattern. So we just passing in values, making sure that everything's working correctly. So we're going to pass this check reset into our contract. So again, we just copy the functionality. We're going to go into the contract. And we're going to put in here. So remember, this instantiates it. So we can't not have something check, which is great because we want to make sure that everything is specific. And we don't want people to just pass anything into our repositories. And then obviously, because we got it inside our contract, we need to make sure that it's part of our repository. Remember, see this red squiggly line here? IntelliJ is telling me, okay, we don't have that because it's part of the contract. It needs to be in here. So remember, IntelliJ knows what we're doing, and we're just going to check this reset here. Now, this is pretty cool because we can just do a little bit of logic here. All we have to do is check against this table, and we're checking against two values here. So remember, we had this thing called update or create. We're actually going to use a different one in this case. And we can actually say $check reset equals password reset. And we're going to use this thing called where. Okay. And basically where is just saying it's going to look to see where something is equal to something else. Okay. That's simple. And it's going to be an array because we're going to pass in some extra parameters. Because we're passing more than one value, it's a little bit more easier for us to do that. So the first thing we want to check is we want to check if the token, so if the token, just make sure that we called it token inside the database. We did call it token, and we've also called it email. So I just had to double check to make sure that we had it the same way. So go back to our code base. And we got token is equal to $token because that's what we're passing in. And we also want to check against the email is associated to $email. And then we just want to find the first entry that we get back from that. Like so. Unsure why this is shouting at me. Oh, it's because I haven't got it in brackets. Will help, I guess. So you'll have to forgive me again. I'm back on the grind again, and I'm making simple mistakes. So let's just clean up this code just a little bit. There we go. Make it fix itself. So basically we're saying we're going to check to see if we have this password reset where the token is equal to token and the email is equal to email. And if we do get a response back, then we can check. Actually, we don't even need to give this a variable. We could just say return because we don't really need to do anything. So this is actually just going to return us back a value if we do find one back to this check reset. So let's head back into the code base, and we know we're returning that back. So whatever comes back, and we go back another step, and this is back into our controller. So if we had to do something like dd and put check token inside here, we should now, if we go into Postman and send off the request, if we send off the request, we get some data back, which is cool. If I happen to change the email address, for example, to Bob8, we get a null value back because we don't have a match. And that's exactly what we want to happen with this application. We don't want them to go too far by not verifying certain information. So all we have to do is in this section, going back into our code base, is we can just return back something very similar to what we have here. So we can just send an error response saying, okay, well, details don't match, for example. So details don't match. And we can send a 400, I guess. And we can say check token. So that's saying, well, if it's null, we're going to send a response back saying, okay, well, the details don't match. So email and token don't match. So if we had to send that in Postman, we should get a better response back. There we go. So now we get a nice response saying the details do not match anymore. And obviously it wasn't, and it's been unsuccessful. Cool. So now that we've managed to get that working, so we know now that we've got this token and we've checked to see that it's valid. Now we need to find the actual user. And to do this is quite simple. We can say user equals $this user service not equals. Then we're going to check to see the email. So we can actually, because this is the nice thing about repository patterns, that we've already got something to check against the user's email. And if we grab this email here and we just pass that into this information, right? And if I had to DD onto user, like so, we should now just get a user back. So let's have a look and see what happens. So let's go into Postman, send off that request, and you can see actually we get a true value back. So maybe this is not the option that we want, because if we're just getting a true value, that means we're just saying, okay, well, we've checked the email and it's a valid email. We don't really want that to happen. We actually want the user object to come back. So we're going to have to change a little bit of logic here. So let's actually call this get user by email. Okay, so we're just making a new function that's going to say get the user by email here. I'm just going to copy that, and we're going to do the same thing that we do every time, just through our repository pattern. So public function get user by email. Again, this is not going to be request email because we pass in the email in. Okay. So this is within our service. And then obviously this is where our business logic lies. But all we want to do is we just want to go to our user repository here. And we've actually got one here, check if user exists by email. That's the one that's returning back our true and false here. So you can see, remember, we got this true and false. So maybe we could clean that logic up later on. So this is a bit of cleanup code that we can do, because now we have two very similar function calls, which you don't really want. So again, remember, I'm just doing this on the fly. I don't really plan these lessons. I just do them. So here we check and see if the user exists via email. So what we can do is we can say, call this one get user by email, just so we follow the same naming convention. We're going to copy this. We're going to head over into the repository contract, like so. Obviously, we need to instantiate it like so. Public function and the name, like so. We'll just block that out. And then obviously we're going to go into our user repository, and we're going to go to public function, get user by email. Okay. And you can see we're already doing something very similar to this. So we're actually just going to grab this like so, and we're actually just going to plot this into here. Okay. Actually, we don't need that return because we're just going to check to see if this is a true or false. Actually, we just want to return back the user. And if it's null, we can then deal with it logically. So we kind of, again, remember, this is copying code. This is something you don't really want to do because, I mean, what's the point of duplicating code? We might need to just change the logic for that one, for example, to accommodate the user, and then we check against the null value, I guess, instead of doing what we're doing here. So now that's set up inside our repository. We can go back. So we head back to the trail, get user by email. We go back again. And now if I DD onto my user here, right? So let's have a look at Postman and see what happens, what we get back in Postman. Let's send off that request. And I get a null value back. Why is that? So get user by email in the user service. We have, oh, because I'm not returning anything back here, that's why. So if we just return back, that's the problem if you copy and paste code, and sometimes you forget to do things like that. So, oh, sorry, I forgot to change screen. So yeah, so the issue was that inside the controller, then inside the service, I copied and pasted this code. which was the issue. You just had to change that to return. Sorry, it's the changing of the screen things. And I think I might just do my main screen. I don't know what's easier for you guys. I'm just trying different things, I guess. Right, so now if we had to go back into Postman, and test that again. So back to Postman, and hit send. There we go. So we actually get our user object back. And that's perfect because look, we have a password entity here. Actually, we should really hide this from inside the model. But again, those are for future episodes, so don't worry about that. We'll hide all this stuff so you can't see it. And all we need to do now really is just obviously tell if we don't have a user, we set an error, and then we just have to do the logic. And it's dead simple to do really. We'll do it in the controller. We should go through the service method, but we're getting very close to like 20 odd minutes. So let's head back to our controller. So we can do a very similar thing like this. So we can grab this logic, and we can just say if there's no user, we can just say user not found. There we go. And that will return back if the user was incorrect. Technically, it will fall over here maybe, but if we do manage to get that far, then obviously we're doing a check anyways. Okay. And then the last thing we need to do really is dead simple. Because we got a user object now, we can say $user. Actually, I forgot to change screen again. I think I'm just going to keep it on one screen, to be honest. So all I did, was copy this bit of code here and then paste it here. And then that way, we check in to see if the user was not found. So here, because we've got the user object, we can quite easily say, well, the user's password that we have, because we know that we've got the password value inside our table, we can do something very similar. We can decrypt it. So the same way that we've done anything with our authentication is we use the decrypt, and then we're going to use request. And then because we're already passing in his generic password, we can do that. So remember in Postman, we have a parameter called password. And then all we have to do is say user save. So we're going to save the user. And then what we could do is on this check token, we can actually delete that outside our database. Again, it's probably best to put this into your own services and then pass it through, but I'm running out of time. So this would be in its own service. You'd say update user password, for example, would be in its own service. Maybe you can do that for some homework. And then this would also be part of a service. Should never put this into controller, but I'm just running out of time. Okay. And then we can pass in a nice positive response here back to the end user saying true password reset complete, like so. And we can pass in the user data, I guess, back to the end user. So just to give you an idea what's happening here, so we find the actual table. So remember in Heidi, we have this, sorry, that's not Heidi. So Heidi, we have our email and our token against this ID. We do a check against that. And then after that, if we don't find it, we throw an error, which is fine. Then we have to get the user because we're going to have to change the user's data. So we need to make sure we get them somehow. And we can do that because we know we've got an email field on our user table. And then if they don't exist, we send a error response back. And then this is your homework because actually I'll put it in brackets. So homework, put into services. That one. Remember, you can get this off GitHub. It is public. It'll be in the description below. So if you need to grab it, it will be there. And then do the same for this one. Okay, so you're going to be putting both of these into its own service because these are two separate things. And then this changes the user's password because we got the user object and we just decrypting it. So for safety reasons, and we save that user. Should really wrap that around the try catch, I guess. And then here, this check token delete is actually just going to, because we got the object of the database entry of the token inside our password reset table, we're just going to delete that out. You don't have to, but we'll just delete it so we know that we don't have any implications later on. And then if that's all successful, we get a successful response back. So let's give that a go. So if we go into Postman and let's run that. So let's hit send. And there we go. We get a nice message back saying password reset has been complete. Obviously, we got our name, email, created that and all that sort of jazz, which is perfect because we can see that today was the updated date of that user, because we obviously changed their password. So now that we've changed that password, let's have a look at the login, and let's try login Bob9 into the application. So let's hit send. And we can see that we get this false unauthorized. That's because we've changed his password now, remember? So his new password that we created was password 2. Actually, I need to change the name of this because it's not update. It's going to be update password. There we go. So just save that. And basically, we've changed it to password 2, and that's why we can't log in. So let's try with password 2 instead. So password 2 lowercase p. Keep it the same and hit send. And there we go. So we know that the new password's working. We've got the token and we've got the user's information. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I know it's been a little bit choppy this episode, and I do apologize. Just remember, for your homework, we do have a little bit of stuff to do, like put these into your services if you don't mind. I'll have it prepped for the next episode, or I'll do a first thing of the session. So in case you don't get it, we'll be able to do it together in like the first 5 minutes, and we'll then move on to whatever we're going to work on next. It's good to be back. Let me know if you like the way how I'm changing screens. If you don't, I don't really feel comfortable yet using it. I might do, but if you preferred the old way where it was just one screen and you could see everything happening, let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, thanks for joining me. If you liked it, make sure you hit that thumbs up. If you really liked it, share it with your friends. And if you really, really liked it, make sure that you, I don't know, just share it with absolutely everybody, I guess. All right, guys, see you guys later. Goodbye.